Now, you are in it for an absolute treat. The two people who are coming on stage, between them have probably more experience than I would think is possible to amass in a lifetime. First of all, we have Rhoda Roberts. Now, Rhoda has a long list of things that she's been part of. I'm going to list about a third of them. She's been a nurse, an actor, a presenter, a journalist, a broadcaster, a producer, a writer, an arts advisor, a festival director, and most notably, a founding director of the Dreaming Festival, which was a very important part of the Woodford Folk Festival for many, many years. Rhoda is part of a family that has actively worked hard in regaining the humanity that was all too often denied to Indigenous Australians. Now, today, Rhoda will be speaking with ShoShona Kish. Now, ShoShona Kish is from the other hemisphere. She's from Canada. Now, she's part of a musical duo, Digging Roots, and they've been writing, recording and performing music for more than 20 years. In addition to their musical careers, they've organised international Indigenous music summits. They've even formed their own recording label for their own music and that of other Indigenous artists. So please put your hands together to welcome to the stage Rhoda Roberts and ShoShona Kish.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for coming to hear us. I'm Rhoda Roberts because I clearly can't sing or dance. And this is ShoShona, all the way from Turtle Island. Before we begin, I know that Australians sometimes feel uncomfortable when we do our rituals of acknowledgement, but from a spirituality point of view and as a Widjabul Wyable woman from the Bundjalung territories of northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland, I am here on the lands of the Jinibara. It would be wrong of me not to acknowledge those lands, all the people. Thank you so much. Because this is like our religion for us. Our language was outlawed, our dance practice and rituals were outlawed, and here we are in 2024, and they're still trying to outlaw our spirituality and religion. So the Jinibara people, does anyone know what Jinibara people, what it stands for, what it means? Well, I think it's actually wonderful because Jinibara is the lawyer vine. Ginny is the lawyer vine and Bara is the people. And I think that's really wonderful because here at Woodford, being on the lands of the Jinibara, what we see all around us is everyone weaving and connecting and gathering together. So I think it's a fabulous name. So on behalf of my clan group, I'd like to say Jumbana Balagamir, Naliba Garama Ba, Garama Jinibara, Jiha Juwaji Jugima Bugube. So that's about, I'll be here, I'll pay my respects, and I hope to take some learnings away from this country with me. So that's enough for me. ShoShona. So wonderful to have you here. Now, we hear of Canada and we refer to it as Turtle Island. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about your language group, your band, your clan, and Turtle Island and what it means?
Yes, Chimigwech. Jaushkoban as a kwe desnikas megazido dam Bachwanan Donjaba Ojibwe Anishinaabe and Dao. My name is ShoShona and I'm Eagle Clan, and my family is from a really beautiful place on the shores of Lake Superior. And it's known as Bawating. It's the place of the rapids. And I am really, really, really happy to be here on this territory and to be so generously and graciously welcomed here. And I'm so excited about the conversation that we're just going to pick up, because Auntie and I were talking, and we're like, what do we want to talk about, and what's really important, and basically solved all the world's problems right before this. And it gives me great pleasure to have time with Auntie, but also just to lift up and celebrate the incredible things that she has accomplished, and the incredibly generous things that she has done for all of us. And when I say all of us, I mean her work has reached us and had a profound impact on Turtle Island, and certainly a profound impact on me. So, when this session was proposed, I was like, yes, please. I just want time with her. And so I'm really grateful for the time that we have together. And, I feel like we could probably talk for hours, because there are so many, because Auntie Rhoda has so much to offer us. But I thought maybe we'd, for me, start at the beginning a little bit, because the very first time that I had a chance to put my feet on this soil was by invitation from Auntie Rhoda. She invited, it was wonderful. And we came to the Dreaming Festival, my husband Raven and I, with our band Digging Roots. And it was a life-changing experience. I had never been to an Indigenous focused festival before, and I, with like an international context, and I was deeply, deeply moved and inspired and changed. And so, I just wanted to say
thank you
in a witnessed way to Miigwech for believing in us and bringing us here the very first time.
Thank you. Well, I got the opportunity of meeting so many amazing artists. So, you just facilitate a festival. You just make sure you get the greatest talent, and then everyone goes, wow, you're brilliant. No, I can't sing or dance, but they did. The Dreaming Festival, did anyone get the opportunity of coming to the Dreaming Festival? Fabulous. Was it fabulous?
It was so fabulous.
Yes, it was at a time when we really needed something like that. And we'd started the Dreaming Festival actually back in the 90s in Sydney. And we continued it for about 10 years in Sydney. And Bill Horowitz used to come down and say, you should move this to Woodford. And we're like, what? No. And we tried to find, we wanted it to be a camping experience. So people were, together and gathering. And unfortunately, we couldn't get a venue in Sydney where they would allow us to set up a camping ground. So it was that year we went, actually, we should go talk to Bill, because he offered it. So we moved it to this incredible site here at Woodford. And it just went from strength to strength. The most extraordinary thing, it was an opportunity, not just for our voices, it was a global Indigenous festival. And I think the big thing was, getting artists from across the globe, but from Turtle Island, Aotearoa, Taiwan, the Pacific, and Sami people. Of course, it was a really important festival for them. And so we all started to link up and connect. Mm-hmm. And I think it was that connection. I remember working at the Opera House, and I was looking for someone who I call groovy, but I'm very old. But I was looking for something that was a bit edgy, that people would find the unexpected. And I remember ringing you going, who is someone that's going to knock the socks but make people rethink? And it was Kinney Starr that you introduced me to. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden we had this network going, and we were able to have opportunities of global exchanges. And I think that was the key to why the strength of, whether it was theatre, whether it was talks, whether it was music or dance, this international, we were all at the same stage where we were living under Commonwealth Acts or issues of occupation, And the voices were more similar than they were different.
Well, and I think too, like for me, having been hosted in that space, it made my world so much bigger. And you know, we had, as a result of the dreaming, an opportunity to go to the Northern Territory. And I remember meeting this young man on the street, and he came up to us and he was crying, and he was like, "You being here makes me know that I am not alone." And it was so emotional for me because that was my experience. Me being at the dreaming made me feel like I was not alone. That these struggles that we were having, and that these profound challenges in front of us as communities, as human beings, as artists, that they were a direct result of very particular strategic things. And also, like, you know, as an Indigenous person, you're taught there's something wrong with you, like inherently, like you're born wrong. And it's taught in so many insidious ways, subtle and not so subtle. And, you know, when you do certain things to people, they react in certain ways. And that global experience really opened my mind to our collective humanity in different ways and helped me know my own self.
I remember one of my first trips to Canada, and of course at that time people referred to Indigenous peoples as Aboriginal Canadian. And so I wanted, you know, I was looking at music, so I went into their major Canadian music organisation, and it was called Karma. And of course we have Karma here in Alice Springs, Central Australian Aboriginal Media Association, and I went to the Canadian Aboriginal Music Association. So I started to see all these acronyms that were very similar, and that use of the word Aboriginal. Of course now we are ever adapting, but we always have this obligation, I expect, that we continue those footprints that were there before us. But we, you know, you might have seen that in Australia people were referencing ourselves as Aboriginal or Indigenous, but then there came a time where it was like, no, who are you? Well, I'm a Widjabul woman. So we started using our own nations and clans as our identity. And then a few years ago, one of our politicians, our famous politicians, I actually had a fabulous opportunity to do a show, a touring show, a one-woman show called An Evening with Pauline. And it was so successful, and all I did was read her maiden speech. That was the act, that was the show. And of course, when I said it, that I've had a gutful of people coming into this country and not learning the religion or the language or the way we are. And so it was really fantastic. I even dyed my hair red. Not a good look. But our Pauline years ago started saying she was Indigenous. And it is, and she still does, yeah. And it's the semantics is Indigenous, of course, means born of that land. So hence in Australia, we started looking at what is the terminology that you can refer to people. So we started using, and as you would know, now often it's First Nations people, First Nations artists and so forth. In Canada, you were using Aboriginal and First Nations, but now you've all switched to Indigenous.
Well, you know, we started to look at the root of the word Aboriginal, ab meaning not, and original. And I think that, you know, we started to question the colonial context of that, and we were like, no, thank you. And I think that there was a conversation happening on a global level that seems powerful and full of potential and connection. So while I'm Anishinaabe Kwe. You know, we say Indigenous because it connects our collective nations to the original people of the land around the world. And it's not perfect because I think Indigenous has been weaponized in some places and is not being embraced. And so, we're having a conversation about how do we find each other and how do we identify and how do we work together to, within colonial languages, to talk about who we are and talk about the land that we're from, which is everything about who we are.
And when you sang about the lands you were from, when I started to hear the songs of digging roots, and Raven is sitting the third row back, beautiful Raven from Digging Roots, I started to hear this language that talked about the sweet seriously, who is ringing me? Because, they must know.
You're very important,
Bloody
Rhoda.
Woodford. They must know I'm on stage. Just checking that I made it. But I started to hear this terminology of sweet grass and sweet water, the mountain water. And so these adjectives and descriptions of country, you didn't have to say any more than sweet grass and you immediately could see the landscape. And it truly, that lyric writing that brought your everyday indigeneity into the songs was truly a tear up. It was beautiful. But your relationship to not only start a band, and we all know how that often goes. It's always the drummers, I've got to say. But anyway, we know how that goes with a lot of bands. You start to make it, next minute you're having babies, mortgages, and the band disperses. And usually it is the drummer that in those early days becomes the manager. So there is a lot of reference to that. So just watch it if you've got a band. But not only are you singing with your partner, your husband, you set up this band and tick, 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 how many years later, and you're still going strong. So I would love to know how you first met and the idea of starting that band, and what's the key to the longevity?
Well, I'm happy to talk about that because now our son is the drummer.
Okay, don't go managing the band.
You ready to manage, babe? And I'm just going to say this is pretty hilarious because I think that I am supposed to be interviewing Auntie Rhoda. But we were talking about how we both are deeply in love and the power of that partnership in our lives. And, and I think it's worth celebrating Indigenous love here. And, so I'm really happy to talk about my partnership with Raven. We met while we were still in university, and I had a professor that knew his family, and I had just moved to Ottawa. And so my professor Armand went to a dinner party with Raven and his family and said, there's this musician who's just moved to town, you should meet, and gave Raven my information. And I didn't have a phone yet, and this was sort of like on the cusp of cell phones being like everyday. Yeah, everybody had one in their pocket. Dating myself a little bit. But, so Raven just showed up on my doorstep one day. And he is the most gorgeous human. So, of course, I was like, yes, please come inside. And we just talked for hours and hours and hours and lost track of time. And I looked at the clock and I was like, oh, shit, I have an audition for this folk festival. And I'd never auditioned for anything yet. I was still dreaming about doing those things. And I was like, do you want to come? And he's like, yeah, I've got my guitar in my car. Let's go. And so we went and we played for the very first time together on stage as part of this auditioning thing. And there were like 3 days of auditions in this folk cafe, and they were giving away one spot. And they gave it to us. And that just I know. It's a true story. And it just set us on a path. And so it was music first, and it grew from there. And I can say that Raven is the kindest person that I know. And so I wake up every day in kindness, and I go to sleep every night in kindness. And when you center yourself in kindness, anything is possible. And so we just celebrated our 20-year wedding anniversary. And
Oh, fantastic.
yeah, and we're having the best time. Not without challenges, and we definitely irritate each other sometimes. We're big personalities, and life is hard and does what it does. But, you know, I think when you end your day in kindness, no matter how hard it is, you're winning. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you touch on kindness, because when you go back and you look at the old kinship system ways, it's always those old people always say generosity. Generosity and kindness builds a balanced society. And it's interesting. Is that the same with your type of kinship system at home?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like kindness is essential. Kindness and respect are central tenets of our value systems. And, you know, and we were talking about this before, is like, you know, generosity, we need to be generous with one another. We don't survive without one another. And I think sometimes we forget that. We are like, you know, think of ourselves as independent or autonomous, and it's a lie. We are not. So when we choose to be generous and kind with each other, it opens a doorway. Because, you know, there are other alternatives, but they're not ones that I want to choose.
When you were a young musician, and, you know, when you're young, you think you can do everything, etc. You can say anything to some extent. What do you think might have been one of the greatest teachings that you learnt as a young performer? Can you think of...
Gosh, I learned so many things. And you know, Rhoda was the first Indigenous woman to have a current affairs show on prime time, national prime time. And I think we're seeing some of her skill here. And she's trailblazed so many firsts. And, you know, I think we were talking earlier about this guy, Gary Farmer, who's an Ongwehoe man from Six Nations. He's an actor and superstar, basically. He's also a musician of my mother's generation. And, you know, when I was young and raging, really, because I was so devastated by having to know the truth of our collective histories as a brown woman, as an Anishinaabe woman. And I was really, like, struggling with that at the time. And I was angry. I was angry with white people. Like, I'm still angry with white people, to be fair. But in a different way, you know. It was an unchecked anger. And so we were having this conversation, late night conversation after a gig with Gary. And he looked at me and he said, well, he looked at us, because Raven and I were both there. He looked at us and he said, you know, they are guests in our home. We are responsible for them. And it really was just like, it blew my mind up, because it was such a, like, it just changed the way I thought about everything and think about it now, because, you know, we are responsible for each other fundamentally. But as Anishinaabe and Ongwehoe and our many nations, we are responsible for the land. We are responsible for the governance and the teachings of that land, and we are responsible for everyone who is on that land. And, you know, and I think that really, like, shifted and changed the way that I came to my work as an artist and into everything about the way that I move through the world, because suddenly it was not the us and them of all of it really couldn't live in the same way, you know, and it allowed me to occupy a we place. And that really changed everything for me.
And I love that. It's a similar thing here, the obligation of who's on country. And of course, you know, things have changed extraordinarily over the last 200 and odd years. But many of you might have heard how the traditional owners, particularly the Uluru family, at Uluru, or Ayers Rock as many know it, how a few years ago they wanted to close the climb on the rock. And there was a big outcry by our Pauline, you know, get to the rock and do that last climb before the Aborigines close it. And I was pretty astounded, the reporting at the time of that closure of the walk. And that was the walk too. And, you know, when they asked, back in the days of Mr. Ayres going with his bus to Ayers Rock, that they named after him, they asked the traditional owners where would be the best way to climb the rock for tourists. Gotta love them. Anangu people picked the windiest, most difficult climb. But what happened was, over the years, very sadly, there were quite a number of deaths. You know, it was a steep climb. There were people who were suffering, weren't healthy enough to climb, and heart attacks. It's really hot and windy, and people were falling. So every time there was a death on that monolith, enormous significance of the Malu story and the Anangu peoples, they were devastated. They would take it as a personal loss because they were still continuing that old kinship thing as the responsibility for people on your country. What most Australians don't realise, there were family groups living at Mutijulu and across Anangu lands, the APY lands, that were connected traditionally to Uluru. So with their own money, and because they were custodians, they would travel to Germany, to Japan, to wherever those that had fallen to their deaths. They would visit those families to say, we are so sorry that you died on our country. Now, a lot of Australians don't know that. And of course, it was getting really expensive. It was really difficult for them. They were getting elderly. And one of the things was, well, if we stop the climb, there will be no deaths on that rock. That has a huge religious significance to the Anangu. And, you know, it's funny how that was never reported. But that generosity of the Uluru family maintaining their kinship systems and taking obligation for what occurred on country. I just wanted to give that little example because I think it's quite recent, but people don't really know about it.
Well, and so many things, so many of our stories that get silenced and not told. And I think, you know, I just feel really honored to be able to lift up some of the work that you've done to ensure that our stories are not silenced. And, you know, from your work with the Dreaming and the Boomerang Festival and Byron Bay Blues Fest to, you know, the Sydney Opera House creating a position for you and your tenure there, lifting up Indigenous artists' voices.
I've got to say, it was bloody brilliant because I was setting up a festival called I'm a mercenary. So I was setting up this festival in Brisbane called Clancestry with QPAC. And the only reason, and this amazing producer, Deb Murphy, amazing. So we saw that APAM, Australian Performing Arts Market, was moving from Adelaide, where it had been for over 20 years, and it was moving to Brisbane. And we thought, oh, will we get a platform there? We didn't know. And so Deb and I talked, and we said, why don't we start a festival so at least we've got a platform during APAM? And so it became known as Clancestry, and I did it for about 3 years, training up some young ones to do it that were from that community. And I believe it's still running today, which is pretty wonderful. Now, I don't know why I got, because, oh God, I'm getting old. I don't know why I got on that.
Well,
subject,
we were just talking about, you know, and I really believe that artists and curators are world builders, you know, and the stories that we tell are
I do know.
magic.
Sorry, I've just got.
So ensuring that those stories get told is a part of ensuring the magic continuing, you know?
I know why I was telling that story now. So they had, you know, all the major festivals around Australia, they have a regular meeting where millions of dollars gets put on the table, and it's about, because theatre and festival shows and that are expensive. So it's like looking at 2 or 3 festivals that can take that act and, you know, support it with the millions it needs. And they asked me to come in to talk to them. So I went in on the lunch break and said, right, and they were all programmers around the country. They were all men. And so I said, well, do you have Indigenous acts at your festival? And they're like, oh, yeah, yes, we have this and this. And some of it was tokenistic. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose, so I may as well just tell it as it is. And so I said, right, well, who's your head of First Nations Indigenous programming? No hands. I said, what? Who programs your ballet? Who programs your, you know, your concerts, your orchestras? And they go, oh, well, we've got our classical music programmer, we've got our dance programmer. I said, but you don't have an Indigenous programmer? Do you not think that's a genre? And there's, you know, would it not be best with someone with experience? Anyway, I went on a bit, left, and thought, well, you were really stupid, Rhoda, because you're never going to get a job in any of those festivals, but, you know. But luckily, the head of the Performing Arts Centre, which is the Sydney Opera House, was Richard Evans. And I got a call a couple of days later going, really heard what you were saying. How do we rectify it? Can we start a position? And that's how I got that position at the Opera House. And I wrote a model. And one of the things I'm really proud of, there's an incredible theatre company in Canada called The National. And they looked at the model that I had started with being head of First Nations programming at the Opera House and said, can we look at that model? I said, yeah, take it. And they then appointed a head of Indigenous programming at the National in Canada. And yeah, so it's just gone round, which is fantastic because you need the expertise. Anyway, I'll shut up now because we do want to go to questions, but I've got one question for ShoShona.
I have so many more questions for you, Auntie.
Yeah. But 2 of the things I've noticed you do, which is groundbreaking. So Womex, out of Womex, you develop an international global summit.
No, it wasn't out of Womex.
Oh.
We were here at Woodford. 2017? 2017. And we were backstage, now behind where the parlor stage is. It was a different stage back then. And there's like a little sort of artist area back there. And there was a bunch of Indig artists and some curators and programmers, including Auntie Rhoda. And we were just having the best conversation. Like, we were just talking about, like, all of the incredible things that people were doing, and they were doing incredible things. And all of the challenges that were happening, and we were like, oh, we're having that challenge too. And then somebody would be like, oh, well, you know what we're doing about that challenge? We're doing this thing. And it just was going on and like this. And we were just having a really amazing time. And I went, I can't remember why, but Rhoda and I went to have a little talk and maybe a little sneaky ciggy or something.
Well, it's a smoker's area.
And we won't talk about that. And I said, you know what, Rhoda, this conversation needs to be a bigger conversation. We need to create a space to keep having this discussion. And you were like, yes, we should. And so I called my friend, who at the time was the executive director of the International Folk Alliance, and I said, I have this idea, I want to do a thing. Like, while we were standing together, I called him. I want to do a summit, and do you guys want to help us host it? And it was like probably 3 a.m. or something for him. And he was like, yes, ShoShona. Yes, I do. And so out of that came this incredible thing that we're doing now called the International Indigenous Music Summit. And it really, like, the seeds of it have been scattered by anti-Rhoda. And, and there are so many seeds that have been scattered, and so many of us just gathering those seeds and nurturing them and sowing them and planting them. And I just want to, the incredible generosity that allows us to, be together in a way that we can dream. Because when you're in survival mode, you can't dream. When you're protecting yourself, your dreams are really different. And, Auntie Rhoda has created this space for all of us where we can dream. And, so out of this comes the summit, and then out of this comes this record label, and that's just one story. I'm just one human.
Record label. ShoShona created an independent record label. Do you know how hard that is? That's incredible.
I just want to lift up my team who's here, because Amanda Rayome and Nicole Auger are here, and we work together and dream the summit every year. And last year we showcased 50 Indigenous artists from around the world, and we hosted the really hard and the really beautiful and the really silly conversations. And we've actually asked the whole industry to change the way that they think about things and do things, and join us in this, this good work of being who we're supposed to be together, which is brilliant and beautiful and generous.
Thank you.
It's called Ishkade Records. Ishkade Records. And Amanda Rayome and I founded that, and we're here as Ishkade Records, really, at Woodford, partnering. And the first artist that we ever signed is playing here, and he's brilliant. His name is Asanabi, and you need to find him.
I think he's on the Savi. Anyway, enough about us. We're going to go to questions.
Yeah, you guys.
Yes, but can I just acknowledge, Andrea, you, one of the great, oh my God, if I could sing like you. But thank you. You're always here. You're always supporting. And I'm not sure when you're performing, but we should do a plug. Huh? Oh.
Andrea's singing with us.
I knew that. So Andrea there is going to be performing with Digging Roots. When are you on?
We're playing every day. Tomorrow we're at the Luna stage, and then I think we're at the Luna stage again, and then we're somewhere else. But come and find us. We'll be really happy to be with you.
So Mitchell has it's Mitchell, isn't it? Close enough. What is it? Mike. I really need to leave the stage. Wayne's got a roving mic. If you have a question, we probably have about 8 minutes, so pop your hand up and he'll come.
Hi, are you going to write about your love story or have you in a song? Because I think that sounds like a brilliant song.
The first, we put out 2 records before we ever recorded a love song, like a romantic love song, because I was really obsessed with love songs for the people and for the positive change. And then we were like, oh, wait a minute, we should probably write a love song. And so we did, and it's called Stay. And I think it's a good song. You can find it on all the things. But yes, we continue to write love songs. All the kinds of love. They're really all love songs.
Jeff's got a question.
Auntie Rhoda, an honour to speak to you again. Is the Dreaming Festival still a potential coming alive again?
This is the perfect question.
Oh, I have such a dream. If I could bring back the Dreaming Festival, honestly, it would be amazing. The situation with festivals, of course, they cost a lot of money, and we really need government support. I've been working at Blues Fest with Peter Noble and we started trying to do the Dreaming, but I don't know if it was a good idea, but anyway, we rebranded it and called it Boomerang, as in you will return. And we've been self-funding that event since 2013. And I have to do 10 jobs a year to put enough money aside for an artist budget. And so this year I just went, we're living off the grid. We've got no plumbing. Do the bucket thing. And my partner said, Rhodes, that money you're putting into Boomerang could get us a whole plumbing system. So I'm going the plumbing, I'm sorry. But it's not, we're going to keep trying because I just think it was an extraordinary gathering. And really, when the time's right, the time's right. I think maybe it's not the right time. We've been pushing and pushing it. But we saw what happened last year and the hurt of that. So I think it'll come. We'll make it happen. And this next generation, I've got to tell you, honestly, I'm trying to step aside because we have so many young people who are just bloody brilliant. I mean, one of the big things I feel really comfortable with is when we talk about data sovereignty. Our young people know that IT, they know that they can hold on to that information for us and control it. So I think there's a lot of good young people out there and we should be helping them to rebuild the dreaming or whatever type of festival they want. But yeah, I'm going to do some smaller gatherings throughout the year and just cap them at 500. And of course it'll be self-financed, but I think that'll work really well. People just want to gather. We just want to talk. Up the back there, sorry. I shouldn't talk so much. I go too long.
We want to hear you talk.
Hello. Thank you. This has been really wonderful and two of my favourite people getting to chat together. This is a question from my great love of nature and the environment. And ShoShona, you've been an incredible singer and speaker for social justice, but also ecological justice too. And, you know, we talk about sweetgrass and sweet waters and how important the land is. And we are entering very uncertain and very terrifying times in terms of the potential for nature to live and sustain us and for us to be able to support the natural world healthily. I want to ask both as a musician, also as a curator, as a platform of the arts, Rhoda, how the Indigenous voice, the First Nations voice, can lead the charge and help us through this journey ahead and be better citizens of the earth and look after what we have.
You go first.
Well, I mean, I think we should be terrified for ourselves. Our first mother will heal herself. And I encourage all of us to really build a deeper relationship with the land that we're on because we are related. And this separation that we have from land is what allows us to just think that she is a resource that we can take from. This is crazy. This is crazy. And, you know, and I'm excited for people to hear our stories and our teachings. I'm really excited for all of us. Not only, I'm excited because we're brilliant and I want our voices heard, but I'm excited for the whole global community because I know that we all benefit when those voices are heard. I know that fundamentally we all benefit. And the thing is that the circle is not whole in terms of wisdom. When we are silencing all of these voices and only listening to certain things, the circle is not whole. So the more that we work towards that whole circle, the more that we will have the wisdom that we need to navigate these trying times. And we do need to. Things are serious. And, you know, as caretakers of the land with an obligation to that land, this is something that we all have. We all have it. And I really do believe that First Nations and Indigenous people can remind us that. You know, and this is part of why the art is so important, because the art can wake up this remembering in all of us, you know, and help us remember who we're meant to be here together. You know, this is my, that's the thing.
Living on the oldest land of the oldest people. How special are we in Australia? We are moving forward in some circumstances. You hear about our fish traps and water catchment, our understanding of the underground filtration system. You see now our fire departments adopting fire mosaic, fire stick burning. The knowledge is in the song lines. We just need to make sure that that language is kept alive in those songs, because it will tell you where to go for water, where to, you know, how to look after the biodiversity of this land. But also I think we do it simply, and if we did it more, take a weaving circle. When you sit in a weaving circle with our women, we might use lamundra, we might use all, you know, pandanus, we use all these different types of plant fibre to weave. But what we're doing is working out when and what the right time and the right way to harvest, how much you take. You don't set up a cottage industry, you're taking it to make a gifting. You learn the language of that plant. You learn the seasonal behaviour of that plant and the water catchment areas it needs. And I go, a simple weaving circle can teach you so much, because you're using the benefits that Mother provides, but you're also creating something that you can gift. It's truly extraordinary. And just that little simple idea and model, if we transported it to other bigger things, maybe there's a solution there. But I think the solution comes from within. When you're a mother, you're not thinking of just your children. You're thinking of the coming children. So we need to think long and hard ahead. But the beauty is, in Australia, we have the first First Nations water scientist in the world. Yes. And he's done all this work with CSIRO. His name's Brad Mogridge. Google him. But he really knows about the Artesian Basin and the dangers that can occur of how we use that type of water and the filtration system that his grandfather told him about. His grandfather had never looked under, you know, miles down under the earth, but he knew this story. And when he started with CSIRO, one of the first things he did was put those cameras down, and holy shit, the painting that his grandfather did was exactly the same as what was coming back from that table. So there is great hope, and we need hope. But we need to learn that we have to work together, because honestly, we can't do it alone. We're all in it together. We just need to be side by side. But hearing the voice of those old peoples, because they did have the knowledge, that's why we're the oldest surviving race on the bloody planet. And on that note, we've run out of time. Can we give a big thank you to our beautiful sister, ShoShona?
And please, so much love for Auntie Rhoda.
Oh, if only I could look like that and sing.
Thank you for taking this time with us. We look forward to seeing you through the weekend.
Thank you very, very much, ShoShona, and thank you so much, Rhoda. Look, if you'd like to catch the band that ShoShona is part of, Digging Roots, they'll be performing tomorrow at 7:20, so a nice early one in the evening, at the Luna. Now, while you get around the festival,